you got to do something in order to get what God has for you. And there are those in the church under the sound of my voice who are under the false assumption that all you got to do is pray about an issue, put it in God's hand, and then not do your part to work on the issue. That couldn't be any further from the truth. There are some things that God expects for us to do to receive the blessing that God has in store for us. This blessing that God has, this increase that God has for you, this favor that God has for you, this miracle that God has for you, this destiny that God has for you, this purpose that God has for you, this power that God has for you will not happen from a position of laziness and apathy. In other words, you're going to have to get up, put your hands to the plow, work your part of the field to get what God has for you. I've never seen anywhere in the Bible where Jesus worked a miracle where the person in whom the miracle was being worked on had to do something in order to get the miracle. And I'm convinced that too many of us want God to do something for us that we can do for ourselves. And I'm so sick and tired of preaching to, teaching to, exhorting to, encouraging lazy folk who only want God to do some stuff for them, but they don't want to do their part for the sake of the kingdom. I declare the last time I read my Bible, God always has somebody to do something in partnership with him for their own deliverance, for their own blessing, and for their own healing. As a matter of fact, when you read the Bible, Noah had to go cut down some trees in order to build an ark to save creation. Abraham and Sarah had to get up and start walking to the land that God had for them. Moses had to get up off his Budamus Maximus, go down to Egypt, and tell Pharaoh to let my people go. Joshua had to get the army to march around the walls of Jericho in order for them to fall. David had to load up a slingshot with some rocks and fire the slingshot in order to kill Goliath. Daniel had to be at least praying in order for him to get out of trouble, get in trouble, and he had to pray his way out of trouble. And Jesus had to carry a cross in order for our redemption to be signed, sealed, and delivered. The problem with so many of us today is all we want to do is have a prayer meeting, potluck dinner, sit down, signify, and criticize rather than do something for the sake of the kingdom. And we got some foolish folks in the church who really think that God's going to mess with the computer at Commerce, Bank of America, UMB, or U.S. Bank and drop $1 million in your bank account. The devil is a liar. And then we got some folks who are so sacrilegious to believe that you can have the favor of God in your life, but then disobedient when it comes time to blessing the kingdom with your time, your talent, and your treasure. We often pray about God blessing somebody, but we forget we are the conduits, we are the derivative, we are the way that God bestows his blessings upon others through our service, through our giving, and through our sacrifice. So here it is. If you want God to bless the poor, you give to the poor. If you want God to bless mission, go around and give some service. If you want God to bless the hungry, you feed the hungry. If you want God to clothe the naked, you clothe the naked. If you want God to bless the homeless, you put somebody up. If you want God to bless the church, you ought to serve in a ministry. And if you want God to bless your life, you ought to be a blessing to somebody else.